And a good Wednesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Got lots to talk about, but first and foremost, the big headline weather-wise is going to be your weather impact alert. And like we were talking about around this time yesterday, it is still going to be for a line of some strong and severe storms that will roll in starting late tonight, overnight, and all the way into tomorrow morning. But there is a little bit of discrepancy right now about what time the potential severe threat is going to end. We'll break down all the full details that you need to know with the specific impacts, which areas are expecting the strongest impacts, and what time the rain finally does clear out as we go into your Thursday. And give a look ahead at the weekend, because it doesn't look like this is going to be the last widespread rainmaker that we do have in the cards over the course of the next few days. So storms tonight into tomorrow, the main headline, some strong and severe, but we are clearing as we go into Thursday afternoon. So kind of answering one of those questions that I did just present to you first and foremost. Let's take a walk around the quad where we're starting to see some peaks of sunshine and some peaks of blue sky. Looks like we're seeing some sunshine down here in Warner Robins, down at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, where you can see the shadows of some of these trees on the side of some of the driveways and the walkways. Downtown Dublin still looks mighty gloomy right now, and downtown Macon starting to see some sun break through the cloud cover. That has been pretty widespread throughout most of this morning. Right around sunrise time, we got the best image of our sunshine, and it was very, very bright as you made your way out the door. But as that sun rose a little bit higher, it kind of crept behind some of the cloud cover that we currently have present, and we will continue to have present mainly to the north of us as we go throughout today. So spot the frontal boundary. That's a fun game that we can play right now according to all these different colors that you're seeing on your temperature map, and it is very, very profound over across the state of Texas. Take a look at this. San Angelo and Dallas in the mid 50s, but you're hovering in the upper 70s and the low 80s farther down in Laredo and into Houston, pretty close to the San Antonio area as well. So that's where the frontal boundary probably has the sharpest gradient, but it does continue to drape across the deep south and the southeastern United States, where you are seeing some cooler temperatures once again in those low and mid 50s on the northern side of the boundary. But down to the south of the boundary, we're still holding on to a warmer and a more humid air mass scattered about the low in the mid 70s, upper 70s in New Orleans and Panama City. And how about this? 83 in Jacksonville, 84 in Orlando, and I imagine maybe even creeping towards the 90s down in areas like West Palm Beach and getting into Miami, even an 80 all the way over in Charleston. So there is a kind of a fine gradient here in the deep southeast, where we are seeing 68s in Huntsville and in Rome. Then you move down a little farther south, some low 70s, mid 70s, upper 70s, and eventually down into the 80s as you make your way down to the coast. So this is going to mainly be attributed to some cloud cover that is going to be lingering all across the state right now. So the more clouds you have present, obviously blocking a good deal of your sunshine. But take a look at how warm it already is here in central Georgia. Temperatures scattered about the low, the mid, even the upper 70s, not spotting any 80s just yet, but right on the cusp of that 80-degree mark down in McRae and down in Vidalia, with the 78 over in Swainsboro, 77 down in Eastman, and it does look like we have another 77 all the way up there in Baldwin County in Milledgeville. So the winds are actually something that we can talk about throughout this afternoon, really going into the late morning, now transitioning into the afternoon. Not only have they shifted a little bit in direction, they're starting to come in out of the southwesterly direction as opposed to dead down from the south, but we are looking at this to be a pretty widespread light breeze, or maybe even a substantial breeze in some spots where you're seeing the gusts up to 17 miles per hour in Milledgeville. But for the most part, your sustained wind's going to hover in that 5 to 10 mile per hour range throughout today, maybe an occasional gust that could pop up to around 20 miles per hour. So this is just continuing to be a continuous stream of pulling moisture down from the northern Gulf. You can see that over in states like Louisiana, Mississippi, down into the Florida Panhandle and the Gulf Coast of Alabama. There continues to be a steady pull of moisture from south up to north, and that's what's creating this patch of some widespread dark green color here on your humidity levels. Well, that is expected to shift over to the east as our front does creep closer and closer and kind of pushes all of that more humid air from the west back over here to the east. And along with that, we just continue to pull it up in areas like the Panhandle of Florida, getting close to Panama City, the Big Bend area. Already some patchy areas of dark green that will continue to try to filter farther and farther up to the north where these winds continue to come in from. So here in central Georgia, dew point temperatures scattered about the low, the mid, maybe even the upper 60s. And these are getting to some of the warmest values that we have seen as of recently, indicating that we do have a good deal of moisture that is back in the forecast down here at the surface. And that is going to interact with our frontal boundary that is incoming later on into the nighttime hours. Here's a look at your satellite and radar imagery. Still appears quite gloomy all about in central Georgia. It's a good combination of all different kinds of cloud cover, whether it's just some thin upper level clouds, maybe some gaps in those where it's not necessarily too dense in nature, but where you're starting to see more widespread gray, maybe even a brighter gray shade. That's going to indicate some denser cloud cover. So a good mix of all of that here in central Georgia. But as you go farther up to the north, that's where the cloud cover is a lot more widespread and a lot more dense, but already getting some showers and some thunderstorms going in the northern portion of the state. They did have the highlighted potential for more of a morning into afternoon risk for starting to see some of these showers and storms beginning to fire up. But right now it doesn't look like the lightning is terribly widespread, but this is pretty widespread rain that is definitely well needed up in the northern portion of the state. Like everyone here in the state of Georgia, we're all under some pretty bad drought conditions, and up here in northern Georgia, no exception to that. Some widespread yellows, some oranges, and some patches of some red that are surrounded by some occasional flashes of lightning here at the top of the 11 a.m. hour and continuing to move over from west to the east and engulfing areas like eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina as well. But back what we're going to be paying attention to is actually not necessarily showing up on your radar imagery so far. It is going to be some widespread rain that is more so directly over into Alabama, Mississippi, and getting over into Louisiana and Arkansas. That's going to be ahead of the frontal boundary that's draped across this portion of the United States right now, and it will continue to kind of have a bit of an easterly motion to all of these showers and storms that will fire up along our frontal boundary, even some severe thunderstorms that are already present over there pretty close to the Austin area, just to the west and the northwest of downtown Austin back there, kind of in south central Texas. So 82 for a high temperature yesterday. We still have not quite made it to that average number of 83 degrees as we've gone into the beginning of the month of May. 47 degrees for a morning low temperature. That compared to 56, that's going to be your average low temperature, so still falling below that threshold. But 47 felt a lot better than 41 the day before, and the 39 that we recorded the day before that, and obviously not getting close to your record low set back in 1997 for yesterday of 40 degrees, 95 for a record high temperature. We haven't really been close to record-breaking high temperatures as of recently, very thankfully. No rain recorded. Your departure is now down pretty close to around 6.5 inches below where we should be. Not to worry. I think we're going to put a pretty good dent in this number, especially in areas west of Macon as we go throughout the rest of today and into tomorrow in terms of your forecasted rainfall totals. Sunrise 6:44 and sunset at 8:19 yesterday. That sunset will be a little bit later today, and that sunrise was probably around 6:43 earlier this morning. But going off of the temperatures, once again, 5 consecutive days to begin the month of May that we have blue boxes. And blue, obviously, a bit misleading when you see these 80s here. It's not indicating a cold day. It's just indicating a day that we fell below that average high temperature of 83 the past 2 days. And if we go back to last Thursday, April 30th, that would mark a stretch of 6 days in a row that we have been below average rolling into the month of May after we had 21 out of 30 days throughout the month of April that were above average for your high temperatures. Not to worry, we are going to get above average as we go into this afternoon, and that's going to really start. Well, I guess the warm-up's already started, and we had a bit of a head start compared to yesterday because your morning lows were somewhere in the upper 50s and the low 60s throughout this morning. So a bit of a head start, and along with that, the steady clearing in cloud cover we will see as we head throughout the rest of the afternoon will help contribute to that temperature warm up above the 80-degree mark and eventually into the mid-80s as we head into 3, 4, and 5 o'clock. And then as we start to head into the evening, we might see some more cloud cover creep into the forecast, but overall the sun is going to start to set as we get closer to around 7 and 8 p.m., and that is going to result in obviously not as much solar radiation that will be present. So your temperatures are going to cool down anyway as we head into the evening hours. 88, my forecasted high temperature for today. Your average high actually got an uptick between yesterday and today. Now sits at 84 degrees, but I still think we'll take over average numbers by a couple of degrees as we go into this afternoon. A warm, maybe even borderline hot afternoon, but the majority of your Wednesday, I emphasized that a lot this morning, and I'll continue to emphasize it because we're not going to be dealing with really anything in the way of rain chances or storm chances until we finally get into the late night hours. So most of today is going to be mostly dry before those storms move in. But once again, let's circle back to this high temperature, 88 degrees, a little bit above average. Like I said, this is going to be a warm, even borderline hot environment, and we are going to continue to have those southwesterly winds, which are a little bit breezier today compared to the last couple of days. So we're pulling in more and more moisture, and we are going to have a lot of surface heat throughout the day today. So we're kind of priming the atmosphere ahead of the approach of this cold front that is going to begin to sag down to the south and the southeast. Right now, we're looking at some low pressure centers to establish themselves along this frontal boundary. They'll continue to kind of slide up to the east and the northeast along it. That's where you're going to see your more widespread clusters of some showers and some thunderstorms. That's going to be more so associated with some form of rotation that is trying to occur. And then we also see another one down there in south central Texas, hence where you do see some of those severe thunderstorm warnings popping up near the Austin area. So let's go ahead and time it all out. According to Future View, 4 p.m. later this afternoon as you're winding down the school day and the work day. Take a look at this. Steady breeze continuing through the south and the southwest. Not too much in the way of cloud cover, but it is a whole different story up in North Georgia and getting up into the northern half of Alabama. Some widespread showers, more so some thunderstorms indicated by those pockets of some dark red that are continuing to be present up there. Then let's go into 8 p.m. So if you have any plans for dinner, say tonight, I would go ahead and make those plans a bit earlier than you originally planned to have them because you're going to want to go ahead and be inside. I would anticipate already by around the 8 to 9 p.m. hours. The earliest entry for some of these storms, maybe even a warning extending into central Georgia, courtesy of a severe thunderstorm warning, I think is going to be around 9 to 10 p.m. So go ahead and make sure that you're trying to wind down for the night already at the 8 p.m. hour because you can see that scattered showers and some thunderstorms are all right on our doorstep there at the 8 p.m. hour, beginning to push in closer to 9, maybe even 10 o'clock. This latest run of Future View is quite interesting because I do follow what it is putting down. It is trying to indicate this weakening trend, this falling apart of this line of some organized showers and some thunderstorms. However, I'm not necessarily buying it to this degree per se because I don't think there's really anything that's going to be running interference, I guess you could say, with this frontal boundary as it does push in. Like I said, it's going to be warm today. It's going to be humid today. And yes, the numbers are going to begin their cool down as we go into, say, 11 o'clock later on this evening. But it is still going to be decently warm, and we're still going to have plenty of moisture in the forecast as the front does drive in. But overnight, into around 3 a.m., we continue to see some pretty widespread rain, whether that's just in the form of showers, whether that's still in the form of a couple pockets of some heavier rain and some storms. And we continue to have that in the picture as we go into morning commute time around 6 a.m. all the way into around 10 a.m., which is kind of the window I've been highlighting all morning long. 9 to 10 a.m., that's looking like the window where we are going to start to see at least the severe weather implications start to clear the picture because as we head closer to lunchtime, I'm starting to see some clearing in the cloud cover and I'm starting to see at least the rain chances, the bulk of the rain taper off farther down to the south and the southeast. You will see, according to this model run of Future View, it looks like the rest of your Thursday is going to be quite quiet. However, there are a couple different scenarios that could occur, and it's all going to depend on the speed and the progression of this frontal boundary through central Georgia. If it's going a little bit slower, maybe it decides to stall out for a little bit longer than originally forecast, then that axis of lift ahead of the frontal boundary is going to hang around in central Georgia a little bit longer. If we can get into the afternoon hours and the front's still directly draped across central Georgia, that focal point of some lift is going to continue to kind of activate once again. It's going to pop up showers and some thunderstorms ahead of it once again. So we could maybe see some better rain chances into Thursday afternoon, but Future View and a lot of other models have not really been picking up on that happening. So I have a lot less confidence in that scenario happening as opposed to what I do believe is going to happen. The frontal boundary moves through and we might even see the severe weather window end a little bit earlier, maybe even before we get out and about on the roads for your morning commute. You did see a couple pause points back around 6 a.m. The bulk of the rain actually looks to move out. We could have some residual showers after that, but it's not looking like it's going to be near as organized or heavy as what the kind of initial push, and that initial band of some rain does move in according to the northwest. So that's going to be my next thing I want to talk about, and we'll kind of circle back to all of this, but let's go ahead and time out what we see here on Future View as we go all the way into the end of the work week now. A partially clear start to your Friday morning. We'll keep the clouds around for most of the day. It might end up being a mostly cloudy Friday for you, not as many peaks of sunshine. This will actually help contribute to some lower high temperatures along with the slightly cooler air that does push down behind this frontal boundary. But that front is going to stall just down to the south of us, a lot like what we were talking about as of the end of the work week last week, where we were creating some widespread rain chances, but it doesn't look like we're going to have those clusters of some widespread rain that move in later Friday. I think if you live farther down to the south, you have a chance of catching some showers throughout your Friday afternoon and evening plans, so might want to have the rain jacket ready to go for any of those plans to kickstart the beginning of your weekend. But overall, most of central Georgia not going to see rain throughout your Friday. It is going to be a dry start to the weekend, but we could look at some better rain chances to re-enter the forecast, as it will continue to be a mostly cloudy atmosphere overnight into your Saturday morning, and I do anticipate Saturday afternoon to have its fair share of some scattered rain chances. So let's talk about your day one storm outlook, because it's a very active picture for not just us in central Georgia, not just us in the state of Georgia, but especially more so over into northeastern Louisiana, central, south central Mississippi, and getting into central Alabama. So you are going to see a level 3 out of 5 risk for these areas in Mississippi and Alabama for the most part, encompassing areas like Birmingham, getting into the Jackson area, and that's where the greatest severe weather potential is going to be all throughout today. However, as you move over to the east, you see that level 3 transition into a level 2, and that level 2 eventually transitions into a level 1. So what are you seeing as this frontal boundary does move over closer to central Georgia in the direction of central Georgia? You are spotting a weakening trend. Now, a weakening trend does not mean that severe weather is not going to be in play whatsoever. It does mean that the farther and farther that this line does push to the south and the southeast, the likelihood of severe weather does go down. But we have seen level 1 sprout tornado outbreaks in the past. So this is why we're not going to keep our guard down whatsoever. It is a promising sign to see a weakening trend with this line, but we are still forecasting some greater severe weather potential for our northwesternmost counties. Jasper, we're talking some areas maybe like Jones County, Monroe County, Upson County, Lamar County. Now, obviously, the severe weather is also not going to obey these specific boundaries given by the level 1 and the level 2 risk, but this is just highlighting the general confidence in areas to the north and northwest of us having the greater potential for some of these potential threats, which are going to be gusty winds, isolated flash flooding, and even the possibility of a tornado are all going to be in play as this line does drive through tonight into tomorrow. Now, I've listed these potential threats in likelihood and confidence of those potential impacts. Gusty winds, I think there's no way around that. We're going to have our fair share of some pockets of those, whether it's 40 to 60 mile per hour winds, or maybe even some isolated areas where you do have some winds above 60 miles per hour, which is going to be the main driver of some severe thunderstorm warnings I'm anticipating. Isolated flash flooding risk, that is mainly going to be for areas in West Georgia and northwestern Georgia. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but the possibility of a tornado is probably going to be the lowest of those, but still a low threat is still going to be a threat, and it's obviously something we'll continue to keep an eye out on. It's something we continue to keep an eye out on with many of these severe weather makers, just monitoring some possible rotation that could spin up. But then you go down into the southeast corner of central Georgia, and you may say, oh, I live in Abbeville, I live in McRae, I live in Vidalia or Soperton. I'm not included in a severe weather risk. Well, you are, as a matter of fact. You are just kind of overlapping in the timing of when these day 1 and these day 2 outlooks are going to kind of come to a conclusion. So the day 1 outlook is going to go until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. It will pick back up at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning for your Thursday, and that's where the rest of central Georgia is included in that green, that level 1 risk. So once again, it's not as high of a risk as what we see out in Alabama to the northwest of us. However, it is still going to be a severe weather risk. And it's been quite a while since we've even been talking about anything in the way of severe weather. So that's why I want to emphasize that you need to make sure that you do have your guard up. It's better to be safe than sorry, and make sure that you do take the proper precautions when it does come to things like this potential severe weather risk, which you will want to make sure that you are keeping a close eye on the radar for, of course, over the course of tonight, especially southeast central Georgia. This is where it's going to more so pertain to your morning commute. So I'm talking to Cochran, Eastman, Abbeville, McRae, down in Cordele, areas farther to the south and the southeast. You guys are going to more so have the timing of these impacts being in the early morning hours as you're normally getting up and carrying on about your daily routine to start the day. So that's where it's going to have implications more so than the late night hours tonight or closer to midnight like it will in areas like Forsyth, Thomaston, and up in Eatonton. So the same potential threat's going to exist as we go into this day 2 storm outlook. But also I did mention that we are going to talk about a low but a non-zero tornado threat. So here's a look at the graph model, the model that we just went through. And this is kind of just taking into all things that are going to be suitable for a tornado to form. So really that instability in the atmosphere and obviously the very humid atmosphere we are going to continue to have is going to lead to a lot more instability and the warm temperatures that we will have. It's not going to be as warm as what you would see in the afternoon hours, but take a look at where you're starting to see some flashes of more so some yellows, maybe even getting into some orange colors. So as you go into green, yellow, and orange and red territory, that's kind of middle of the road. It's not necessarily a high tornado parameter, but it's kind of right there in the middle of the road where we do have flashes of that, mainly to the west of us, but some of those could pop up here in west central Georgia. These kind of gray and these white shades, not really much to worry about. That's where we're really talking about that non-zero tornado threat. And that's what we do see for the most part. But notice the time frame right here. 10 a.m. on Thursday, this is when I'm forecasting most of the severe weather threat to end, and you can see that there are some flashes of some yellow that are still trying to pop up in our southeastern corridor as we go into Thursday afternoon. Now, I think this tornado parameter, in all honesty, is not necessarily lining up with what the graph model is saying in terms of where your rainfall is going to be and where your thunderstorms are going to be. I think they've still moved off well down to the south and the southeast around this time frame throughout tomorrow afternoon. But it remains to be seen, and we obviously will keep you updated for as long as the severe weather event is going to be going on throughout these overnight hours into early tomorrow morning and even into tomorrow afternoon if need be, but I don't have much confidence in it continuing past that 10 a.m. hour tomorrow morning. In terms of your rainfall amounts, this model run is definitely backing off on some of the rainfall totals. There is a very drastic weakening trend with that latest model run of the graph that we have seen. I think we're going to get more rainfall than this. I think most areas are actually going to be somewhere around a ½ inch to around 1.5 inches of rain. That's going to be pretty widespread, but we also have the potential for some isolated pockets of 2, 3, maybe even 4+ inches. And that's where your rainfall could begin to be a bit of a problem if you are to receive some higher rainfall totals. But notice it's a pretty fine gradient. Some of these darker colors indicating some totals of 2 to 3, maybe even closer to 4 inches. They're pretty close to us. They taper off as they move across that state line, but I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe some of those higher totals pop up in west central Georgia or northwestern central Georgia because those areas are going to be outlined in a flood watch. So this is something that we obviously have not had to talk about in quite a while because it's barely been raining whatsoever over the last 8 months in central Georgia. So this flood watch is going to start around 4 p.m. on Wednesday. And for these counties here in northwestern central Georgia, Upson, Lamar, Monroe, Jasper, and just right here on our periphery, we're talking Butts County, Henry, Spalding, getting into Pike County. These areas are not going to really get a start to this flood watch around 4 p.m. It's going to be closer to around 9 to 10 p.m. before the rain even gets going in our northwestern corridor. But there's a whole lot more areas that are included in the screen shade over to the west in Alabama in the northwestern portion of the state. So that's why it is starting a little bit later this afternoon. But it is going to go all the way until the 8 a.m. hour tomorrow. What we're really going to be looking out for are some isolated flash flood warnings, which obviously if we are to get warned, we will be letting you know about it. But some low-lying areas near bodies of water, maybe near some creeks or some streams or some ponds, normally is going to be of concern. But given how bad of a drought that we're in, a lot of those bodies of water, the levels are a little bit lower than normal. So I don't think it's going to be as much of a concern near those bodies of water. I think it's more so going to be the areas that get a whole lot of rainfall dumped on them. What we have training thunderstorms. That means that pockets of heavy rain are going over the same area and the same area, just like a train car would be going over the same area and the same area of some railroad tracks. So those areas that maybe get around 4 inches of rain, even higher totals, and especially if they don't have the best drainage system whatsoever. Maybe you're looking at some of those runoff areas on the side of the road. those areas are going to be more susceptible to the ponding and some standing bodies of water. So that's what I want you to be on the lookout for, not just in these areas that are outlined in the flood watch, but anywhere here in central Georgia. Mainly over to the west, that's where we have the most confidence. But if you are to see any standing bodies of water throughout tomorrow morning on that morning commute, it's important to remember to turn around, don't drown. A lot of times those standing bodies of water and those ponding areas, they're going to be a lot deeper than what they appear. And the last thing you want to know or want to have to do is climb out of your car, because that water is going to be a very deep puddle and your car is going to get stranded within some of that flood water. So the main takeaways that you need to know with this, the greatest risk is to the west and the northwest of us, but it is still possible for us to see all threats here in central Georgia. That's for all counties, whether you live down in Toombs County, whether you live down in Telfair, Dodge, Wilcox, or you live up in Monroe County, Upson County, Lamar, getting into Jones, Jasper counties. I think if you live farther up to the north and the northwest, you're going to see the strongest impacts a little bit earlier into the late night hours tonight and closer to around midnight. But as we go farther along into the early morning tomorrow, those impacts will start to decrease, but we do have all forms of severe weather on the table: damaging winds, the tornado risk, isolated flooding, and even large hail. We don't have a lot of confidence in the large hail parameter in terms of this. However, it is still going to be a risk that is outlined. The chances of that are really just looking possible in Alabama, northern Georgia, and maybe even getting to the southeast of us as that front progresses out of central Georgia. The severe threat should clear just after the morning commute, but again, we could see it end a little bit earlier. We could see it end a little bit later, but right now I do have the most confidence in right after that morning commute time frame, 9 to 10 a.m., for that severe weather potential to come to a conclusion. Then after that, we should get some peaks of sunshine. I do anticipate about an 81-degree high temperature tomorrow, so not necessarily the coolest air that's directly ushering in behind this frontal boundary, and you will see a 20% chance of rain late night tonight, 80% for tomorrow morning. Everyone's going to get something in the way of rain, so that 80 and that 20, add them up together, that's a 100% chance of rain. It's just some areas may not be dealing with anything in the way of rain anymore by the time we transition officially past midnight into your Thursday. And then a slight cool down, 56 for a morning low temperature on Friday, 76 for a high temperature, and then those rain chances like we were talking about on Future View going to be the greatest down to the south. Only have a couple more minutes left, so I'm going to kind of zoom through this. Brief cool down into the beginning of the weekend, back into the low 80s, but still just below average as we go into Saturday and Sunday. Morning low temperatures going to hang out in the 50s after we have a very humid and a pretty warm start to the day tomorrow, 65 for a morning low. So some scattered shower chances will continue to be present along that stalled boundary as we go all the way into Saturday afternoon, but then it does look like some form of a low pressure center establishes itself over to the west, rides that conveyor belt over, and Mother's Day Sunday. It is unfortunately not looking like the best forecast to do anything outdoors. Widespread showers, even a couple pockets of some heavier rain and some storms going to be possible all throughout most of the day. And then we officially transition into Monday, where I think most of the rain tries to get out of here by the morning hours, and then we will hit a dry stretch of weather around Tuesday and into Wednesday next week. The humidity day by day kind of tells the story. I think areas farther down to the south a little bit more humid than areas farther to the north as we go into Friday, but we are going to watch the humidity rebound as we go into the end of the weekend before dropping back down again as we go into the beginning of next week. Going to get our fair share of rain from not only this line of storms moving in tonight into tomorrow, but also going to continue to supplement that with about another inch, maybe even inch and a half of rainfall. How about this? Before the next week is over, some totals of around 2 to 3, maybe even 4 inches of rainfall. And luckily for us, all these totals are kind of spaced out. We don't want any more than about 3 inches at one time. Even some totals a little bit below that. Around an inch of rain is going to be good throughout one singular weather maker. And the same thing kind of following suit here on the GFS, but higher totals are going to be present up to the north and the northwest of us, which brings me to my last point. We talked about all the potential impacts and the time frame of this. So starting late tonight, as early as 9 to 10 p.m., all the way through the overnight, and into the early morning hours tomorrow. Around 9 to 10 a.m., I think we'll be able to officially issue the all clear in terms of any potential severe weather. Make sure that you go to bed and you have a way to receive possible warnings, but also make sure that that way that you are getting your possible warnings is going to be loud enough to wake you up. I want you to go ahead and continue about your normal routine. Go ahead and go to bed. Obviously, it might be a bit of a restless night with all the lightning and thunder nonetheless, but I want you to make sure that that way to get possible warnings will wake you up, and you are going to be alerted if something is to pop up in the way of a severe thunderstorm warning or even possibly a tornado warning. Drive with caution tomorrow morning. Avoid those isolated areas of some flooding on the roads. Remember, turn around, don't drown. And then as we go into tomorrow afternoon, hopefully we won't be talking about anything in the way of severe weather whatsoever anymore, but obviously want you to stay weather aware during this overnight time period. Tonight into tomorrow morning, we'll provide you with updates on everything you need to know throughout that entire time. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.